So today we're going to have a look at the ToLiss Airbus A321 in X-Plane 11.5. It makes no difference whether you're running X-Plane 11.4 or 11.5. I'm just trying the beta out and it seems to be operating pretty well so far. So I've got the plane cold and dark on the apron at Palmdale Air Force Base in the US, purely because I wanted somewhere with quite simple scenery so it'd be nice and smooth and we wouldn't have anything in the way of the explanation. So let's have a look inside the aircraft. Oh, before we have a look at the airplane, let's have a look at little nav map. So what we're going to do is set the airplane up while it's on the tarmac, put in a very basic route around a circuit, and then fly the circuit and land it, just to show the operation, the basic operation of the aircraft. Again, I'm not an official Airbus pilot, obviously. This is just showing the basic things I have learned from watching others, from reading the instructions basically and looking through the manuals. I'm not going to cover absolutely everything. This is just going to be the basics to get the aircraft up and running. So the first thing we want to do, and it's worth pointing out, I'm going to use key bindings to whiz around the aircraft quickly. First thing we need to do is enable some power on the aircraft. Now you can see I've got external power available. I'm not going to use it because I think it's more interesting to show what you can do if you don't have external power. Because if we do, you plug in your generators and everything lights up like a Christmas tree. But let's do it the long way. So we turn on the batteries, and that gives us some electricity and some warnings kick off straight away. So it's saying that basically there's no power being generated by the engines yet. The reason for that is the engines aren't running, and it's a bit of a pulling yourself up by your bootstrap situation with a modern airliner, in that they burn fuel in the engines to generate electricity to power the systems, but in order to get the engines running you need the systems running, so you need some electricity to get the systems to start the engines, see, and so on and so forth. So before we bother with any of that, we're going to go straight up above, sorry, it's up here, to the ADIS system, because this is the longest thing to configure, and we're going to switch these three to nav. This is the inertial guidance system, by the way. We're going to move this knob to heading, and we're going to set that to system number 1. And now that's going to have a delay associated with it. You can see it's on battery at the moment. It will take roughly 7 or 8 minutes for that to happen. If we go and look down in the cockpit, we can't see anything yet because there's no displays on. So if we go and switch on the auxiliary power unit, we'll get enough power to see what's going on with that in terms of its status. So let's turn the master switch on for the auxiliary power unit. The other advantage of not using the external power is we'll be able to hear the auxiliary power unit start up. So we're going to click start, and we hang on for, I'm going to wait for a few moments, and we'll look down here so we can see things happen. So this is all powered off batteries at the moment, but you can hear things happening in the kind of the guts of the aircraft, of the auxiliary power unit coming online. And you can hear that fine whine in the background. That's the auxiliary power unit. And when it gets up to speed, we'll be able to see on the displays what's going on. And on the, what's it called again? The ECAM screen, you'll be able to see the status of the auxiliary power unit. So let's give it a moment. Shouldn't take too long. Basically, once it has enough power, it will boot up the systems. Here they come. So you can see the screens are doing self-tests. That'll take it a little while. We can immediately go and turn the brightness up on some of these screens. So these two knobs here are the two center screens. While we're waiting for the screens to come up, we'll turn the brightness up of the others. So we've got the left-hand knob is the left screen, the inner knob of the right-hand knob is the right-hand screen, and we'll do the same for the co-pilot over here. So the inner knob, it's all mirrored for the co-pilot. So how are we doing on? So maximum 40 seconds that's going to take. Okay, let's have a look round. So on the MCDU, we can turn the brightness up on those as well while we're at it. Okay, so we have systems up and running. IRS in alignment in 7 minutes. So it's going to take a while. There is a trick in the simulator we can use if we finish everything before 7 minutes is up. To accelerate that, to kind of, to push the simulator forwards. We see we've got a discrepancy on the barometric pressure. 1018. Let's have a look at that. So yeah, it's because it probably wants it to be 2992 until we're taxiing, and then we would go and change it from the control tower to the actual. I've kind of jumped the gun a bit. I'd previously configured the aircraft and the simulators hung on to it somehow for 3005, which would be the QNH for Palmdale. Anyway, so we've done that and the error's gone away. So if we go and have a look up here, we've got the APU on now, so it's important that we switch on the APU bleed. And if we go and look down in the status down here on the eCams display, we can go to the APU page and it will show us the status of the APU, and it's all looking good. Flap open means we've got the bleed switched on, and you can see the pressure on the bleed valve, 38 psi. So I think in the, I'm not an expert on any of this, but within the plumbing of the aircraft, the hot air from the APU is used to funnel around to do other things before you use the jet engines to do the same trick. So let's have a look around. So we go back up here. We have power now, so we can get the fuel pumps ready. We're still waiting for the inertial guidance. We can turn this backup navigation radio on. We can. The Econ flow button here is if you have less than a certain amount of passengers in the cabin, you can switch on the economy mode for the air conditioning system, so it doesn't kind of push itself as hard to keep the cabin at the correct temperature. The reason the engine faults are showing is obviously the engine's out. As we described, the engines aren't producing electricity yet. What else do we need to look at? We need to arm the emergency exit. So yeah, that's not a button, it's just a light. The trick with the lights on an Airbus is they tend to only light up if they need to attract your attention. So the default position for any of the switches is that they are dark. So that's on purpose. So yeah, your eye is drawn to things that are lit up, basically. That means it needs either your attention or it needs something to happen. So let's go back, look down in the cockpit. We are not going to be pushed back, so we can actually get on with starting the engines up before we do the FMC programming if we want. So we can come down here and we can turn the engine mode to start, and we can engage the starter for engine number 1. You can see as soon as we do that, the N2 percentage for engine number 1, the left-hand engine, is raising. So N2 is the gas turbine speed as a percentage of nominal, and nominal would be maximum thrust or maximum speed for that engine. N1 is the fan speed, because these are turbofan engines. EGT is the exhaust gas temperature, so you can see it's pumping fuel through now, it's burning it, the temperature is raising. We can see fuel on block, which is 7,000 kilograms of fuel in the aircraft, and we can see our fuel flow in kilograms an hour. So you can see that engine is now stabilizing, so we can go and turn on the second engine. You hear noises happening in the bowels of the aircraft, and you can see the N2 percentage is now raising for the right-hand engine. The exhaust gas temperature is raising. In a few moments the N1 percentage will raise. So again, that's the gas turbines, that's the turbofans, and that's the temperature. So we can see now we have raised now we have enabled the engines or switched the engines on. The doors have closed. That's an automatic system that kicks in that does that. So we can see statuses here. We've got the parking brake on, we're in ignition mode, TCAS is on standby, APU bleed is on. Now we have the engines running, we can go and turn the APU bleed off. We can also turn off the APU. So we can disable, the light will go out on its own for the start with a bit of luck. Give it a few seconds. You have to trust me on this one. Okay. I'm just trying to think what else we need to do. Oh, we need to go and switch the mode back to norm. Okay. The other thing with the TCAS we haven't configured, so here's your transponder over here. We can switch it to transmit receive mode. So TCAS is on standby, it's saying there at the moment. Is it really? Oh, it helps if you switch it on. If we move the camera slightly, we can have a look at that. So, because some of the controls were obscured. Yeah, that's fine. So if we go back over here and have a look. Oh, I've gone and switched that knob while there's something actually about X-Plane that really quite annoys me, is the mouse wheel controls knobs in most of the aircraft, and you also use the mouse wheel to zoom, so if the mouse happens to be over a control, it will mess things up. Okay, so let's put that back on fuel display. We need to program our route. You can see at the moment this is showing GPS primary lost. That's because it's still saying IRS in 1 minute. Also, we need to do something in here. So I've got a shortcut that will take us straight overhead the MCDU, so we can easily see what we're doing. So, initialization. That's interesting. We're going to go anyway. Let's program this in. So if we go and have a look in Little Nav Map, KPMD is the airport. So KPMD to KPMD, and we program that into there. And as soon as we have done that, we get another. Boxes basically mean you have to fill this in. We get a line IRS. That's the thing that I was just saying. Oh, that's interesting. I was expecting that to be there, but I haven't flown this aircraft for a little while, so there you go. Now we've done that, because we've been messing around in there for a minute. If we go and look, yes, it's saying GPS primary lost still. Is that still saying? No. I was expecting that to have switched on. Okay, don't worry about that for the moment. So, flight number. Let's make up a flight number. So Airbus 123. Cost index. So this is a rating that sets how much fuel you want to burn, basically, of how expensive your flight you would like your flight to be. Cruise level will go for 5,000 feet. What else do we need to do? If we go and look in our flight plan, you can see we've got, because we've set where we're going from and to, we've now got from and to configured, but we've got a discontinuity in the middle of it because we haven't actually programmed any waypoints. So we can use a bit of a trick here. I'm going to put in the waypoints we saw in Little Nav Map. So you've got JJOL, JARZO, TRJAN and AMANE. So we are going to go and program JJOL, JJOEL, and we can click on top of the discontinuity and it will insert it before it. Okay, there it goes. Now we're going to go and put in JARZO, JARZO, ZO if you're American. So there you go. And now we're going to go for TRJAN, TRJAN, and we're going to program it. And there it goes. And we can scroll this up and down. It's interesting that this is kind of the reverse that you'd expect. You have to think in these arrows in terms of pushing the screen contents in that direction. And Amani is our final one. AMANE. And we can insert that. And then we can go and clear the discontinuity. And it's happy with that now. The discontinuities won't go away on their own. So we can insert that into the flight plan. That's done. We can also, when we're looking at the flight plan, if we go and... So we're going from KPMD. If we go and click on that, we can go and set up our departure. So we're taking off on runway 25. So we can choose runway 25 and put it straight into the flight plan. We're not going to bother with a standard instrument departure. And we can clear the discontinuity that's appeared, and we can push the contents that way until we see KPMD appear again. We can say this, it knows automatically this is the arrival, it's the final appearance at the runway, and we want to land again on runway 25, and we want to use the ILS, so we'll do that. We're not going to choose a star, and we'll insert that into the flight plan, and we'll just have a quick look to make sure that's there and there's no discontinuities and it all looks good. So insert, save. Oh, we don't need to save, of course we don't. That's to save it for another use. Something that's worth pointing out actually is when we went into init and we put our route in, there was alternate company route or load. If you have saved a flight plan, you can program the code, whatever you saved it as, back into there and it will reload it. Alternatively, you can do XP plan load, and that will show you a list of files that you have saved in the X-Plane output FMS plans folder. So if you had used something like Little Navmap to prepare your route, you could put it in that folder and then just say load, and it will give you a list, you choose it, and it all fully configures itself. Or as much as you have in your flight plan, I should say. So we can have a look in nav radios as well. It's got a database built into itself, so it knows that the ILS was 110.7 for runway 25. It also knows the course of that runway accurately was 251 degrees, which is good. So we're pretty good, and the course for the ILS itself is 255 degrees, 3 degree slope, so it's all, you know, pre-built in. It saves you a lot of work. What we haven't done yet is the performance data. So we can look this up. In the real aircraft they would have a tablet with the company software on it to do this. In the ToLiss Airbus we get the ISCS tool. So this is a tool for managing the simulator as well as the data inside it. If we had been shortcutting earlier the ADIRS system, we could have gone into here and clicked ADIRU quick align, and it would have skipped the 7-minute wait. But we are most interested in the performance information. So we are going to say we want to take off with flaps 2, and this will give us our vertical, our V1 references, and it also gives us a flex temp. It also gives us a centre of gravity, 28.2, and that's relative to the runway we have programmed. If you have not programmed your departure runway, you won't get this data in the application. So it's kind of integrated. So 157, 160 and 162. So 157, 160 and 162. And we want to get that flex temp, and I didn't even look to see what that was. So let's go back into ICS, select flaps 2 again, which will give us our data. Flex temp 36, 28.2 up 0 for the centre of gravity. So 36 for the flex temp. And yeah, that would be flaps 2 slash 28 point, sorry, up 0, sorry. I'm not going to bother typing it in because we know what it is already. So if I put 2 in there, that should be enough for us for the moment. If I wanted to fill that in, I'd put 2 slash and the trim, but I don't need to. Okay, so then obviously for the real aircraft, or if you were a professional pilot, you would be going through each of these pages checking all of your configuration for the various phases of the flight. And the nice thing about the Airbus is it will follow them, and it will follow them very accurately. Okay, so we are not really interested in any of that. So we can see fuel predictions as well, which is really handy. And we can see the flight plan. So we're pretty much good to go at this point. So let's have a final just quick look around. You can see now I've programmed a flight plan in. We can see it on the center console here, and we can zoom in a little bit so we can see it closer. We can look at the autopilot. It's worth a bit of a a look at this as well. So the autopilot on the Airbus has selected mode and managed mode. If a setting up here appears with a dot next to it, it means it's in managed mode, so it's going to follow the flight plan that's programmed. If it does not have the dot, it means it's in managed mode, so you have set it. And what that really means in the real aircraft is you push it for managed mode and you pull the knob for selected mode. So we can do that by hitting the top half or the bottom half of the control with the mouse. So if we go for the top half, that pushes it and you get managed mode. If we press the bottom half, that's the same as pulling it and you get selected mode. So for example, you could set your climb out speed for whatever you wanted, 200 knots for example, but we're going to leave that on managed. Obviously the same goes for heading, so you've got managed mode, you've got selected mode. He says, famous last words. It's not going to let me do it for some reason, probably because we're not in the air yet. Altitude, again you can go and set your cruising altitude. You can go for selected and managed mode on that as well. And vertical speed obviously works in concert with your selected altitude, so you would select your altitude and then choose your vertical speed to get there, but typically the Airbus will choose its own rate of speed to get there based on all the configuration parameters you've chosen. Obviously you've got the button to choose between indicated airspeed and Mach number. You've got the various buttons, like most of the big jets, to choose what you're going to show on the map. So we can show, for example, the waypoints. We can show VOR information if we've got it programmed in, NBDs, non-directional beacons, airports. So there's our airport. Yeah, so it's pretty standard stuff. Oh yeah, you can obviously push to get the standard QNH, which you would use at your transition altitude typically. So I'm going to change this at this point. I'll do it while we're in the air to 3005. So we can start taxiing. So let's go and do that. We're going to move our flaps to 2. So we've released the parking brake, moved our flaps to 2. Oh, we haven't turned the radios on. That was a bit of a schoolboy error. So let's go and turn the radios on, both sides. We will need those a bit later on. Oh, actually we won't, because this is the Airbus. I'm thinking in terms of a Boeing. In the Airbus, the ILS has already been programmed. This doesn't control the ILS. This is purely for communication. There is a backup mode, so you can use it for standby and do that. So let's have a look then. We're ready to go. So we're making our way towards the runway and we're using nose wheel steering to maneuver the aircraft. So we'll cheat at this point. Oh, actually no, we won't. We won't go and look at little nav map because we're not sure that it'll work. Before I've had the situation where you switch between little nav map and the simulator and you end up killing the simulator. So let's just have a look around. Yeah, we can get around the back. So we're obviously following the reciprocal route than the actual runway course, so we're going to turn in towards the runway in a moment and then we'll be good to go. Brake gently. So if you wonder why we just faded in and back out, I have just chopped out. You're obviously not bothered in watching me taxi around a number of taxiways around an airport, so I thought I'd edit that out for you. So we're just about to pull onto the runway at Palmdale. I'm going to cheat slightly here to save a bit of time and turn across the lights, which you probably shouldn't do. Okay, let's get into position on the runway. Runway 25. Okay, let's go through a final couple of checks before we take off. We have got flaps 2, speed brakes armed, wheel parking brake is off. Everything's looking good. We can see on the indicator here we've got flaps 2, the flaps have actually travelled. Wait, I'm rolling. And we're not going to bother with a chronometer or anything while we're flying around. So, okay, we're ready, we're good to go. So full throttle. So we're waiting for about 160 knots for rotate, typically with the Airbus. Bumpy runway is throwing us around a little bit. So, and rotate. So 15 degrees. Gear up. Flaps up. So flaps 1 now. So there we can go and enable the autopilot. On climb out, to get the autopilot to engage, we have to move the throttles to this point, and it will be reflected by this indicator showing we are in speed mode. It wants us still in climb. There we go. And you can see the aircraft is already following the flight plan. So it's managing its speed itself. It's obviously bringing itself up to 250 knots, which it would do below 10,000 feet, but already at 5,000 feet. And I wonder if we'll get a warning. I'm going to raise the altitude and expedite it. We'll just go to 7 to avoid this hill.
2,000.
So the aircraft's completely looking after this all itself. Everything's in managed mode. The autopilot's on. Auto throttle is on. So it's managing speed. It's keeping to 250 knots below 10,000 feet. We would set the QNH for the landing at this point, I guess. So 3005. So we get an accurate reading of where the ground is.
2,000.
Let's move down in the cockpit a little bit so we can see out the window. So where are we? We're just entering the downwind leg. So you can see it's nice and flat out there, so we can descend down to 2,500 feet to pick up the ILS in a few minutes' time. So you can see the airbase out there that we've just left. And it's looking good. So let's start descending back down again. So if I say we're going to drop back down to 5,000 feet, and let's do it at 1,000 feet a minute. And we press this to select it. And you see the vertical speed drop. We have the option on the vertical speed as well to set it on managed mode, and it will do the appropriate rate of descent that it thinks for the situation of the aircraft. So just for fun, when we come around the base leg, we'll switch over to selected mode on the autopilot and get it to do what we want rather than what it wants to do. So we'll begin doing that now. Let's go to selected speed mode. So let's take it down to 200 knots. So you can see the speed falling off already. The way the indicators typically work is the green arrow is showing you what your speed will be in 6 seconds time. I think it's 6 seconds. And you get your obviously your target is there. So I'm going to drop the flaps to 1. We're right on the edge of that being an overspeed, but we won't worry too much. If we're really worried, we can extend the speed brakes, which will get rid of some speed in a hurry.
2,500.
There you can go, the speed brakes have deployed and you can see the arrow coming out. So let's drop down another 1,000 feet and let's expedite this. So we're going down at 2,000 feet a minute down to 4,000. Let's also put the gear down. So it's now coming around the base leg. Let's turn the speed down to 180. Get rid of the brakes. So you can hear the engine spooling up to keep the speed to 180. We're at flaps 1 at the moment. So we're now on the base leg. So if we look left from the cockpit, we're quite low on purpose. So I just want to make sure that we engage the ILS so you see it do a nice landing. Again, this is really just about showing you that you can interoperate with the aircraft quickly and accurately, and it follows the ILS very, very well. So let's turn that to show 10 miles. What we can also do is switch this to landing mode and then put this on arc, change the range over here to 10, so we can look over here to see where we are, but we can look over here to see the ILS. Which is quite a nice way to do things. Should we rate? Let's go back up to 5,000 feet. Expedite. Wait, not approach mode. I want to expedite my climb. So the reason it's saying terrain is because it's within 1,000 feet of our altitude. So let's have a look outside. Yeah. Okay, so we're turning back. Flaps 2. Obviously, because we expedited the climb, it's taken over the speed, so it's not on managed speed. We can now engage approach mode and watch what happens. So we are below the localizer at the moment. You should be able to, in the Airbus, when you're on approach mode, engage both autopilots. And then you get the Cat 3 lights up, and it's got the glide slope. So it's on the localizer, it has the glide slope. It's in Cat 3 dual mode. So I'm not sure if this is unique to the Airbus, that you can engage both autopilots when you're on approach mode. So you can see we're on the vertical component of the localizer, we're aligned with the runway, there's a slight crosswind that's pushing us, which is why we're crabbing to the right slightly. And we're coming in. All very controlled. Unlike my circuit where I was showing you various different things on purpose really, just to show you the things it would cause. Whoa, look at that on the grass down there. That must be the biggest game of lawn darts ever. Okay. Some of the stock scenery, isn't it? Where they've got various different crop patterns built in. Okay, it's coming in nicely. It should flare itself on automatic landing mode. So all I should have to do, ideally, is I'm going to keep an eye on it and have my hands on the throttle and stick just in case I do have to cancel the autopilot. But all I should have to do is hit the brakes and reverse thrust. And then obviously pull the flaps back up once we slow down.
500.
So it's almost nothing to do. It's a nice luxury to have with the Airbus, I guess. Obviously this isn't very windy, there's not much turbulence around, and there's no other air traffic around, so I get to concentrate on showing you how it works.
200.
Too low, flaps.
It's interesting that it's telling us that.
Too low, flaps.
100.
Too low, flaps.
50.
Too low,
40.
flaps.
30. 20. 10. Retard. 5.
So brakes on, thrust reversers on. Thrust reversers back off, and just using the brakes now to slow us. And then we'll take this next taxiway. Should be slow enough by then. And that was pretty straightforward, really. And we can roll back and go and park up. So I'm guessing you don't want to watch me taxi back, so I'm going to leave the video there. But yeah, we had a good look around the Airbus. It's quite straightforward to control. Everything seems to work quite nicely. Obviously I did a few things that were completely not in the rulebook, but again it was nice to show you how some of the systems work. So I think I'll leave it there.